Bolivian presidential candidates spar in televised debate ahead of presidential elections. A malaria outbreak in northern Mali has killed at least 23 people in the last 7 days. The Iranian currency has reached a low point as the country struggles to survive severe sanctions imposed on them by the United States government. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm Laura Palmeiro. Bolivia's first presidential debate ahead of general elections set for October 18 has kicked off. All 7 candidates vying for the country's top job are taking part, including the candidate for the Movement Towards Socialism Party, Luis Arce, who has continuously been the front-runner in all opinion polls. This is the first time in 18 years that Bolivia has held a presidential debate with all candidates present. The police officer who pushed a 16-year-old boy off a bridge in Chile on Friday has been officially detained. The Attorney General's office made the announcement on Saturday afternoon. A video showing the teen being thrown by a bridge by a law enforcement officer into the river below quickly spread on social media last night. The boy was eventually pulled out of the river and taken to a hospital where he remains in serious condition. People have gathered outside the Santa Maria clinic where the 16-year-old is receiving treatment to demand the resignation of the head of the special police force known as Carabineros. They are also demanding a full investigation into Friday's violent repression. Mario Rosas was also accused last year of supporting acts of police brutality during mass protests. On Friday, protesters in Mexico clashed with police during a demonstration to mark the 52nd anniversary of the Tlatelolco massacre. About 1,000 demonstrators gathered in the square where the government forces opened fire on a student march, killing around 350 people back in 1968. Each year since then, social justice causes are added to anniversary march, with protesters this year demanding justice for 43 students from Ayotzinapa who were forcibly disappeared 6 years ago.
Above all, it's a movement that is still looking for the fight. It is still in struggle. October 2nd, Ayotzinapa mass kidnapping. Any kind of historical event that has been against students is still in fight.
Mexico's Supreme Court of Justice has voted in favor of a referendum which seeks to prosecute the former presidents for their crimes. Let's take a closer look.
López Obrador celebrated that for the first time a referendum will be held in the country, as citizens will be asked where they agree to prosecute former presidents for corruption.
That is the essence of democracy. The ministers adhere to the spirit of Article 39 of the Constitution. That power emanates from the people, and they have it all times.
The Supreme Court of Justice had to analyze and endorse the request for the referendum and the question proposed by the president, which was modified.
Our review function should be deployed in such a way as to enable citizen participation within constitutional channels.
With 6 votes in favor and 5 against, Mexico's highest court decided on the question that will be posed to citizens on June 6th of next year.
People will undoubtedly vote in favor of prosecution. Who wouldn't want justice to be done?
The National Electoral Institute is about to conclude counting and verifying the signatures in support of the referendum, collected in less than 2 weeks by different groups.
Mexico is fed up and wants justice. The signatures are not from anyone with money. They come from the people who organized. There were no ads on TV or radio.
So far, these are plans to prosecute former presidents Carlos Salinas de Gortari, Ernesto Zedillo, Vicente Fox, Felipe Calderón, and Enrique Peña Nieto. However, survivors of the 1968 student massacre are demanding the inclusion of Luis Echeverría.
The latest migrant caravan to set up from Honduras toward the United States has officially decided to stop their trek north. According to Guatemalan authorities, the migrants have all agreed to return to Honduras after being threatened by deportation with the government. Over the past few years, migrants from across Central America have been fleeing violence and extreme poverty in their home countries, walking thousands of miles in search of a better future. While addressing the UN General Assembly this week, Brazil's far-right president turned heads when he decided to blame wildfires currently destroying the world's largest tropical wetlands on indigenous people who have historically lived in the region, ignoring the fact that at the moment only volunteers and indigenous communities are fighting to stop the blazes.
Wildfires in the Pantanal wetlands have increased by more than 220% this year, reaching half of the region's indigenous land. The far-right president recently gave a speech at the United Nations blaming Native people for the fires.
The fires are taking place practically in the same spots in the eastern area of the forest where the Caboclo and the Indians burn their lands searching for survival in deforested areas.
The president's accusations contradict the almost 2,000 indigenous people fighting the raging wildfires. Other groups of volunteers are also risking their lives to protect the rainforest.
His talk at the UN only shows his complete ignorance. It's sad to see and hear that, but we're not going to give up. We will show everyone that it's not us setting the fires. We're not destroying what is ours. Those who are burning our lands are illegal farmers and loggers.
The Ministry of the Environment announced that all operations to combat deforestation and wildfires will be suspended. The justification is a budget cut of approximately 60 million reales for the agencies responsible for preserving the environment.
The president is blaming us for the fires. Deforestation by indigenous groups is not the issue. We should have state support to fight these fires, but we depend on volunteers.
The brigades have been fundamental in the fight against the wildfires, but the life of indigenous forest guards are often at risk.
We could be seriously hurt by the fires. Our forests are dying too, and could collapse on top of our heads. Animals are running wild and endanger us too. We need to continue fighting to stop the causes of these fires.
The firefighting brigade recently reported that 5 Wato indigenous people were hospitalized with burns on the soles of their feet. Meanwhile, the reporting team tried to contact the Ministry of the Environment about the suspension of firefighting efforts, but there was no response.
And we'll take a very short break now, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. A malaria outbreak in northern Mali has killed at least 23 people in the last 7 days. The country's Ministry of Health said almost 60 people have died of malaria in the north since the start of this year, almost double the number of deaths over the same period last year. About 13,000 malaria cases were recorded in September. The increase in cases has been worsened by recent heavy rains in the country.
The health situation today in Kidal is very alarming, given the influx of malaria patients throughout the region. The health structures are really overwhelmed by patients. We are also seeing a large number of deaths due to severe cases of malaria.
These past 3 weeks, we recorded a total of 537 cases of malaria, of which 164 cases of severe malaria were hospitalized.
In Egypt, archaeologists have discovered 59 ancient coffins buried some 2,600 years ago just outside Cairo. The sealed wooden coffins were found in Saqqara, south of the capital. The archaeologists believe the coffins were the predators and the senior statesmen who lived in the 26th dynasty. Saqqara is one of the world's most important archaeological sites, designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1970s. Dozens of statues have also been discovered at the same location.
في حالة جيدة جدا من الحفظ ويحتفظوا بألوانهم هم لمجموعة من الكهنة وكبار الموظفين من العصر المتأخر، يعني نتكلم حوالي سنة 600 قبل الميلاد.
Ethiopia's largest ethnic group, the Oromo, have gathered in Addis Ababa to celebrate the annual Thanksgiving festival. This year's Iresha festival attendance was lower than usual as the government restricted attendance to 5,000 people due to the pandemic. The group, led by the traditional leaders, gathered at several pools of water, symbolizing gratitude and renewal. The Oromo tribe is the largest ethnic group in Ethiopia, constituting more than one-third of the population.
Because of coronavirus, many people are not attending the celebration. Only a few people are attending this year. It would have been great if there was no pandemic.
Tunisian hospitals have been overwhelmed by the COVID-19 pandemic and are struggling to cope with an influx of new patients. The country's authorities have warned citizens to respect measures put in place to halt the spread of the virus. The country had almost contained the pandemic at the end of June, when there were only 1,000 cases and 50 deaths. But cases started to increase after the government lifted lockdown restrictions. The number of confirmed cases has now reached 20,000, including 300 deaths.
On est sur nos gardes parce que, comme je vous l'ai dit, la situation, la transmission est importante. Et si on n'arrive pas à infléchir donc cette courbe qui est vraiment en train de monter.
Talks ahead of a reconciliation process between Libya's warring parties have resumed in Morocco. Representatives from the UN, recognized Government of National Accord, and Marshal Khalifa Haftar gathered in the Moroccan city of Busnika. The talks are aimed at cementing an agreement to bring peace to Libya. And we'll take a final short break now, so stay with us.
Checking our special content. In our website, where you will be able to get the most reliable details and numbers for each continent, available from your mobile device. Follow our
in clusters close are engaged. Welcome back to From the South. The Iranian currency has reached a low point as the country struggles to survive severe sanctions imposed on them by the U.S. government. The Islamic Republic's authorities have reported that the Iranian rial has dropped by 12% against the U.S. dollar. The sanctions have caused oil exports, the country's main source of income, to drop sharply. 14 people have been killed in a suicide attack in eastern Afghanistan. 42 others have been injured in the attack after a truck loaded with a bomb reportedly exploded near a mosque, where locals had gathered for prayers. No group has yet claimed responsibility for the bomb blast. The attack comes at a time when the Afghan government and Taliban are engaged in negotiations in Qatar to end the country's decades-long war.
13 civilians and 1 military personnel were murdered, which brings the total number of deaths to 14. Also in this incident, 42 others were wounded, which includes 4 military personnel, and the rest includes children and elderly people.
Thousands of Bulgarians have gathered for the 87th consecutive day to demand the government's resignation over allegations of corruption. Protesters are calling on Prime Minister Boyko Borisov, along with his government and the country's chief prosecutor, Ivan Geshev, to stand down. The nightly demonstrations began in early July, triggered by heavily armed police that officers of a staff linked to the country's president Rumen Radev, who is a vocal critic of Borisov and openly disapproved the appointment of chief prosecutor Geshev in 2019. An Italian judge has delayed the hearing of far-right leader Matteo Salvini, who faces possible charges for blocking over 100 migrants from disembarking in Italy. The judge delayed the hearing until November 20, so he could hear from senior members of the government, including Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte. Salvini on Saturday appeared before a court that will decide whether he will face trial on charges he abused his powers as interior minister.
We are happy that there will be additional instruction because it will allow us to shed light not only on the facts but also on the decisions taken at the time. We will be able to question political figures who are still in their positions of responsibility, including the President of the Council of Ministers.
U.S. Republican senators have canceled legislative work until October 19 as the coronavirus sweeps through their ranks. Just since Friday morning, President Trump, the senator of North Carolina, Utah, and Wisconsin have announced that they have tested positive. But Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell said that confirmation hearings for Supreme Court nominee Amy Coney Barrett are still on. Over the last week, many of the politicians who tested positive attended events at which a few people wore masks and mingled in the Capitol Hill complex. United States President Donald Trump has received an experimental drug against COVID-19 at the Walter Reed National Military Medical Center. President Trump has reportedly shown mild symptoms, including a fever, nasal congestion, and cough. The president is reportedly not planning to transfer his authority to Vice President Mike Pence, who is the first in line of succession if Trump were to become too ill to carry out his duties. And now let's take a look at other stories from around the world.
%10% of the global fatalities and behind only the United States and Brazil. The Health Ministry also raised the confirmed caseload to more than 6.4 million infections. Public health experts say the disorderly lockdown, which led millions of migrant workers to flee from cities to villages, possibly carrying the virus with them, further complicated the fight against the pandemic. Residents of the French South Pacific territory of New Caledonia are gearing up to vote in Sunday's independence referendum. But experts expect voters to reject breaking away from France's control after almost 170 years, despite rising support from the move. The referendum is part of a decolonization plan agreed in 1998, known as the Nouméa Accord, designed to put an end to a murderous conflict between the mostly pro-independence indigenous Kanak population and the descendants of European settlers known as Caldoche.
From a moral point of view, all the blood spilled, all the history, for me this is the final goal of independence. People have died and there have been conflicts, so you can say independence is the answer to the blood that has spilled.
If you look at the life we lead on the territory and all the advantages we have it, will be totally illusory to change course. Most importantly, because there is no answer from those in favor of independence on what the future holds. They say we'll see, but they have 30 years to discuss the project, and at the moment, we have nothing.
In Italy, at least one person has died and some 20 others are listed as missing after severe flooding across the northern parts of the country. In the region of Piedmont, the situation has become critical as bridges collapse. Houses have been evacuated and whole villages have been cut off after the downpour rendered roads impassable.
And we have come to the end of this news brief. Remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Laura Palmeiro. Thank you for watching.